All right, welcome back to the Forfeit Fatherhood podcast, a podcast for fathers by fathers, where we talk about the four pillars of fatherhood, which are faith, family, finance, and fitness. And we're taking a little break from the action. I know the last few weeks we've had guests on the podcast, and I know how you guys feel about the guest podcast. We did a live podcast as well, but this one is just me, man. This is just me talking, catching up, talking about some things that have been going on in my own life, some things that I'm working on, some things that I'm working towards. And I say a break in the action because after this podcast, I have like 2 months of podcasts on deck, working through the editing process on some of those, but guest episodes are coming. Really been grinding out with some great guests. I think there's going to be a ton of information shared for you guys. Some experiences that are unique, that maybe you haven't yet experienced, or maybe you've experienced something similar and can learn and lean on some support, or just some good-hearted dad conversation, right? Which is, like I said, always is the reason why, excuse me, the reason why I started this podcast is because I didn't feel like there was enough dad conversations out there, conversations with dads talking dad stuff. So that is what's on deck. Um, in this episode, I do want to talk about a couple of things. I have some notes here, so for you guys that are watching online, you'll see me look down from time to time at some notes, some things that I definitely want to bring up with you guys. One of those things is vulnerability. I think I've talked about this before. And actually, you know what? Let me before we get too far into it, just some really quick things, because I know that the podcast is going to go a little more deeper into this vulnerability thing. And keep in mind when I say vulnerability, we're talking about vulnerability as a leader, as a man, not vulnerability as a weakness. I believe vulnerability is a strength. And it's something that I am very, very forward on. I don't even know if that's the right word to use, but I'm not against vulnerability. I think it can be a superpower. But anyway, let's before we get into that, but that's what we're going to talk about. That's going to be the crux of the podcast. So we'll get to that in a second. Couple of things that I want to kind of bring up to kind of talk about. In previous episode, we're talking about health, right? Because we talk about, as fathers, as men who are trying to become better men, what's the lowest hanging fruit for us to do that, right? What's the one thing that we can do that's going to have the biggest brush stroke? What is the minimum effective dose? What is the one thing that we could do that could affect all other things? And I say this all the time, is when I work with guys, the number one thing you can do is take care of you. And the number one thing to do when you're taking care of you is to focus on your fitness, focus on your health, because you are the center of all of the things that you hold dear. They don't revolve around you. You're not like that. Like everything is about you, not in that way, but like you don't get to be a father if you get sick and die. You don't get to father in the way that you want to if you're out of shape and overweight. You don't get to love your wife the way you want to when you're overweight and out of shape. Your wife doesn't love you the way you want her to when you're overweight and out of shape. Your kids don't want to play with you. You can't. Like my daughter the other day, at her game, just randomly was like, "I'll race you to the car." Now, if I'm out of shape, I gotta start backpedaling. I gotta start talking about ways to get out of this. But don't challenge me, kid. Like, you better challenge somebody else. You better go challenge one of them little kids on your team. I'm not one of your little friends. And and I'm thinking that it sounds like my mom. But I'm thinking to myself, like, yo, let's go. Before we start, are we dropping our bags? Are you going to take your backpack off? Are you going to take your bat bag and sit it down? Or do I sit these chairs down? Or are we just running the way we are? I just need to know. I want clarity on how you want to take this L. Because daddy's been taking care of his health. If my knee is good again, like daddy's been taking care of his health and fitness. The surgery is over. It's healed. I'm ready to go. Like you thought you was catching me when I was weak. That's what it is. You see, you thought because I had a little surgery, I was vulnerable. You was going to take advantage. Nah, sister. That's not it ain't that type of party. I'm ready for it. And she decided she wanted to drop her bags. I was like, you fool, you should have kept them. I got 3 folding chairs and a cooler. You should have kept your backpack on. You might have had a chance. Put them bags down. See you later. See ya. But again, that's the kind of father that I want to be. Maybe you don't want to be that kind of father. Maybe you want to be, when the kids say, let's go outside and play, you want to be the, no, I'm daddy's too tired father. Or, you go outside and play and you got a few buckets in you and you're winded and you got to go sit down, and they got to play by themselves for the next 45 minutes. If that's the type of father you want to be, that's cool. That's your choice, right? I don't have anything to do with that. That's you and how you parent. For me and mine, though, like, we're going to get it in. We're going to blood, sweat, and tears it until they can finally beat me officially. But for right now, you can challenge me to whatever you want, right? Whatever you want. I want all the smoke, all of it, right? I'm ready for it, because that's the kind of person I want to be. I want to be able to rise to the occasion. I want to be able to show them when you're faced with adversity, you're faced with a challenge, you stand up to it. You don't back away. And, that's a small instance, but that's what it is. Anyway, saying all that to say, like, you have to start with you and start with your health and fitness. And so now, as I mentioned a second ago, my knee is healed. I had a little cyst that I had to get removed from my knee, so I couldn't, do some of the stuff that I normally do. Couldn't run, couldn't jump, couldn't squat, couldn't deadlift, for like 3 weeks, for 2 weeks. But then, 2 weeks passed, and me being me, I come from an old school of rehab, which means, I ain't gonna be no bitch, and I'm finna go get it in. Went to go squat. Squats felt great, until I finished my last set, and I looked down, my leg felt wet. So I'm like, dang, I'm sweating a lot. And I looked down and there's blood running down my leg, because where one of the stitches was, I kind of ripped it back open. So I got put on the shelf. Doctors obviously not happy about that. I got put on the shelf for another 2 weeks. So, and then it's like, okay, you better make sure it's good. So 2 weeks turned into 3 weeks before I can get back into it. But I'm fully back into it. And here's what I noticed. In those almost a month and a half of not being active, not being able to be active in the way that I want to. I can still do upper body stuff and walk and all that, but it's not the same. I realized that, one, my patience was lessened. I was more tired and doing less work. I wasn't the same caliber of man that I normally am. When I say I was less patient, I was short. I was frustrated for some reason. Like, I couldn't work out. I tired, had to go to bed early, kind of stuff. Not tired like sleepy, but just like I was exhausted. And I wasn't doing more work, I was doing less work. But anyway, just things that I noticed, right? One of the other things that happened during this time period is, I have my morning routine, right? And my morning routine, part of that routine is, and you guys heard me talk about it a few weeks ago, is exercise, right? And with exercise kind of being taken out of it, it threw my routine into like shambles, because working out is a big component of that. And because I couldn't, it kind of threw my routine into shambles. And so I wasn't able to do the things that I normally do, right? Like, I didn't get up early like I had been getting up early, because I had no reason to. I couldn't go work out. So then I was waking up around the time the kids need to wake up, which meant I didn't have time to meditate. I didn't have enough time to get to 32 ounces of water. My green shake was being sacrificed because I was making their breakfast for them and getting them ready for school. So I wasn't getting my green shake. I wasn't doing I wasn't hitting the sauna. I wasn't doing a cold shower. Like, all of these things kind of centered around my workouts. And the other thing that I stopped doing is I stopped drinking my Magic Mind. I don't really know why, honestly. I just had stopped. It was like, after the first couple of days, I'm like, I don't want to waste these on days where I'm not actually doing what I'm supposed to do, which it sounds foolish, because it is foolish, right? Because had I been taking them, because I had already noticed from taking them that I felt better. I felt a different level of focus, right? And I've never really been able to focus fully. Like, this is the thing. If you ask my wife, and if you listen to the podcast when it's not a guest episode, you kind of can hear me kind of going all over the place. I try to get back on track as much as I can, but never been able to fully focus. And it's been one of those things where I've just learned to deal with it, which is why I work really well on checklists. Like, I can hit a checklist, or you give me a recipe or something like that, or sets and reps, I can stay really close to it. But if you kind of let me freestyle, I freestyle. And it could be anywhere and all over the place, right? And so, if you're like me, you're very rarely 100% focused. Like, when I'm on something, though, I can be on it. Like, if something happened, I can lock into it and be on it. But I noticed when I was drinking the Magic Mind, I felt that level of focus that I hadn't really felt before, right? I had energy throughout the day, even though I was getting up early to go work out and hitting my morning routine, right? I felt energized instead of I remember back in the day there was a commercial for an energy drink, and they would talk about the that was it to 2:30 feeling, and in the commercial there was, people were by the water cooler, and they're dragging around and look tired. It's that 2:30 feeling, right? They hit the brick wall, because that at that point that's where all the energy of the day had been drained, and they're supposed to take this energy drink and then, bring them back to life. What I realized with Magic Mind is that I didn't have that 2:30 drain. Like I was just good. I was up, I was alert, I was able to do what I needed to do, and I was doing more activity, which would make you think like the more work you do, the more tired you're going to be, but that wasn't the case, right? So in not taking it, it made me more aware of the fact that, oh man, it really was what was happening. Like it really was a thing. Like this is a part of my morning routine that I cannot not have, because it affected me in such a way that I took notice, right? And it's the ease of getting it back into my morning routine. Now that I'm back on my routine, like it's not some extra thing. Like, for example, the shake takes time, right? Like a shaker cup and protein powder is really easy. When we talk about a green shake, like I can't put kale and spinach and fruit into a shaker cup and shake it up. So it takes time. Magic Mind, twist the cap, boom, two ounce shot, I'm good. And so adding that back into my routine, like I feel great. And you try to like try different things and figure out what it is what is the thing that's doing it. It could be this, it could be that. It could be the fact that I wasn't hitting the other things in my morning routine, but I was getting more sleep. So I felt like that should counter that, right? It should be kind of like a way to kind of counter that. But I was getting more sleep, it felt less productive, right? Now that I'm back to drinking the Magic Mind, I'm getting less sleep and I feel more productive. I'm not having to have 3 or 4 energy drinks during the day, right? I like the taste of them, so I'll have one, but I don't need any of them. I don't need it to keep me awake. I don't need it to help me overcome that quote unquote 3:30 or 2:30 feeling. Like I'm good to go, right? I'm ready to rock. And my mornings start strong and my day continues strong. And so it's something that I mentioned to you guys before previously. It's something you guys you guys you listen to podcasts. You obviously listen to this one. You probably heard Joe Rogan talk about it. There's a couple of surfers that talk about it. Koa Rothman and Nate Florence. If you're into the surf world, I used to train surfers, so kind of pay attention a little bit. If you pay attention at all to the Kardashians, they are drinking it. What I like about it, obviously, besides the fact that it makes me feel better, and I have the focus that I've been looking for, and I have the ability to stay attentive to detail and do all the things I need to do. If you don't like it, right, and it's not working for you, you don't feel like it is doing what it said it was going to do, they'll give you your money back, right? 100% money back guarantee, no questions asked, right? So there's not any risk to it. If you don't like it, they'll get you your refund in a couple hours, right? Like it's not like one of those things where you gotta call customer service and they gotta try to talk to you and they're gonna talk you out of it, or blah 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 blah. Don't have to worry about it, right? So here's what I suggest. Because it worked for me, it doesn't necessarily mean it's gonna work for you. But because they have that 100% back, money back guarantee, right? There's really no risk. Okay. So here's what I'm suggesting to you. Go to the Magic Mind website, right? It's magicmind.com, magicmind.com. Go to their website. Go magicmind.com / Forfeit Fatherhood. And then because you use that link, you're gonna save 20% automatically. Okay. If you use my code, okay, my code is Forfeit Fatherhood. You're going to get another 56% off of your first subscription, or you get that 20% off, right? So if you just want to try it and get the 20% off, you want to do a subscription like I do, you get 50%, 56% off. It'll save you in the long run. Trust me. You don't want to have to, once you try this stuff and you love it like I love it, you're not going to want to have to go back and try to like order it again when I'm down to my, we only got a couple bottles left. I better get this order in. Now you want it on subscription, so it's just coming to your house. So you don't have to worry about having days where you're sluggish or you're missing out or you don't have the stuff that you need to get you going throughout your day, right? It's important that you do it. Sorry. It's important that you subscribe. But if you just want to try it out, just try it out. Okay. I'm cool with that. Again, it's www Forfeit Fatherhood. The code, and I think I might have said it wrong a second ago, but the code is Forfeit Fatherhood 20. Okay, so www/Forfeit Fatherhood and use code Forfeit Fatherhood 20. That'll save you 20% off of just a regular box. And if you do a subscription like I do, it'll save you 56% for the next 10 days you use the code. Okay, so you got a couple of days. I would say act now though, right? Because obviously it's going to take some time for it to get sent to you. And if you want to try to power your day and get your day started the way you're supposed to, then you got to do that. Okay, so that's just, again, this episode is about observations, right? Something I observed while I was messing around and got hurt and kind of changed my whole morning routine. But for fathers who are trying to get better, who are trying to do things that are better, taking care of your health is number one. Number two is your emotions and your emotional maturity, right? So if you're taking care of your health, now you got to get your emotions in check. Emotional intelligence is what I would suggest you start looking into. Emotional intelligence. There's a book called Emotional Intelligence that I read a few years back. If you know what, you go back into the archives of this podcast, I did a whole episode about the book as a review. And that book and Emotional Intelligence 2.0. So you can go back. I think it was around this time last year, and look at the podcast and listen to the podcast and learn a little bit that way. But I suggest you go get the book, take the test, do the worksheets, figure out where you're lacking in your emotional intelligence and work on building that up as a strength, because it's super, super important for you as a man and as a parent to have social awareness, to have self-awareness, to be emotionally intelligent and understand the emotions that you're feeling and how to handle them, so that you don't become emotional or run by your emotions, because you understand how emotions work and what emotions are. I think a lot of us only have a couple of emotions. We're happy or we're sad or we're angry. And because we only have those three emotions, we only have three options. And we aren't able to be the complete man that we want to be because we don't have options to do so. So I highly suggest, after you take care of your health, and maybe concurrent, like you do it at the same time, you're working on your health and you're working on your emotional intelligence, because health is one of those things that there's no finish line. It's the infinite game, like Simon Sinek talks about. It's not going to end. You're always, once you start working out, you're always going to be working out. It'll change. You'll do different things. You might pick up CrossFit. You might drop CrossFit. You might do high intensity interval training, low intensity yoga, whatever, right? You might do some bodybuilding at some point, but you're always going to be working on your fitness, because as long as you're alive, you have to be working on your health. Okay. Emotional intelligence is very much the same way, because life is going to continue to change around you. And the way an emotionally intelligent man in the 80s wouldn't survive today with the same type of emotional intelligence, right? Because it changes. Things change. Society changes. Your awareness has to change. Okay. So you're working on your health, you're working on your emotional intelligence, and then leadership is next. And this is where we get to the vulnerability piece. Okay. You have to start thinking about your fatherhood, and not have to, but what I started to do is I started looking at my fatherhood and my household as a business. And I think this is really easy for us, because a lot of us are providers for our family. We either work for a company or we own a company. And so we understand business to some degree. We know that if we are a boss or we're an employer, we have people that work under us that depend on us for leadership, right? They have roles and responsibilities that they have to take care of, but we get to somewhat dictate, lead, guide them in a ways that make sense for the company as a whole. The reason I bring it up and frame it that way is because there aren't a whole lot of, let me stop. If you go to Amazon, there's millions and millions of books, right? Go to the library, go to Barnes and Noble, millions and millions of fatherhood in the way that I'm talking about right now. They exist, right? But harder to find. But easy to find, books on leadership, books on brand building, books on company culture, books on finance. All of these business books work really, really well in helping you develop as a leader of a household. Again, in this same book review kind of vein, I did a business of fatherhood series where I kind of went through these different business books and talked about how they apply to you as a father. But with leadership, I think sometimes we get confused with leadership and dictatorship. When we say we're the king of the castle or we're the head of the household, we look at it as I'm on the top and everybody else is underneath me, which may be true, right? There is a hierarchy that you're at the top of. But what typically happens in those situations is that those people on the bottom don't really get access to the people at the top, right? If you look at kingdoms in the past, like the peasants or the common folk of the town, they never got to meet the king. They don't know who the king is. I mean, they know who he is because he makes rules and they know he comes out on the thing and he talks to us all, but they don't know the king like that, right? I don't want that in my household. I don't want my kids who are the common folk. I don't want them to feel like they can't talk to the king. I don't want them to feel like they don't know the king. And so what I do in my own particular situation is I flip that pyramid where I'm on the ground floor and I'm supporting them. I'm still the most important part because if I'm not stable, that triangle tips over. So I'm still very important. I'm very integral. So I don't want you to get that confused and think that, we put ourselves last, we put ourselves at the bottom, nobody cares about us, blah, 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 blah. It's not the case, right? But we flip that triangle or that pyramid and we put the king at the bottom in support of everyone else and making sure that they're all funneling into what the king is doing. Like everybody's working into just naturally gravity. Everybody's working into the thoughts and alignment of the king. Whereas the other way around, when the king's at the top, it's hard to get up there. It's hard to ascend to the level of the king. And not that you should make your life easy or life easy for your children, but it should be a situation where you are not only leading them, guiding them, and teaching them, but you're supporting them in their efforts to reach whatever standards you have set for them. This is where what I was talking about at the beginning, when I say vulnerability is a superpower. Vulnerability is important. And I could a couple notes that I was talking about, but I was watching 300 the other day. One of my favorite movies. So Matrix 300, Training Day, some of my favorite movies. But watching 300 the other day, and you get to that scene where Leonidas is kind of facing off against Xerxes, and Xerxes is, the god king, and he's sitting on his throne. He's got people carrying him, and he's talking to him, trying to get him to bow, take a knee or whatever. And Leonidas walks out, and as he's walking out, you get the narrator kind of talking to you about what's happening. And he says, he drops his shield, right? And if you understand anything about, the Spartans, the shield is extremely important because the shield, and then they band together, protects the man next to him, himself, and the man on the other side. Like the shield is super important. The strength, like we talk about the wolf, right? The strength of the wolf is the pack. The strength of the pack is the wolf. Spartans fought in the same way. Like they were strong because they all were strong together. The strength of the Spartan was the other Spartans, right? And the way that they locked up and linked arms and fought was extremely, extremely important. But so he drops his shield, and it tells you, because the weight was heavy, he's continuing to walk forward. He drops his mask, I'm sorry, his helmet, because so he can get a better line of sight, right? So he can breathe better. You would look at that and say, oh my gosh, first of all, he's walking out away from the security of the other Spartans, number one. Number two, he doesn't have his shield, one of the most important artifacts that they would use in battle. Number three, he doesn't have his helmet. His dome ain't even protected. Oh my gosh, Leonidas is in a vulnerable position. But then what happens next is he lifts his spear and he chucks it. He wouldn't be able to do that if he was still holding his shield. It would throw him off balance. He wouldn't be able to do that if he was still back there with the guys where his support system was. He wouldn't be able to see as clearly when he threw a spear if he had his mask on still. So he had to be vulnerable in order to do what he needed to do, which was show everyone that Xerxes was not a god. He threw the spear. He did not kill Xerxes. And I think everybody thought he was going to hit him in the chest. Boom, hit him with the spear, right? Kill him. Everything was going to be over. But that's not what happened. What happened is that spear grazed him, right? Just hit his face, hit his ear. And what we see is what was a god bleed like a man, which now to everyone is like, oh, we're not fighting gods, we're fighting men. And we've killed men before. We can do it to another one. And it gives the troops behind them or behind him the courage to continue to fight. Even though his vulnerability got him killed in that moment, and this is just the example that I'm using, without his vulnerability, the guys behind him that were following him, the guys he were leading, they don't get up enough strength, courage, and honor. Like they don't continue to fight forward unless he goes and becomes vulnerable, right? So when I say vulnerability is a superpower, it's hard for the people who follow you to follow you if they don't feel like they ever have an opportunity to know you or be you, right? When you're invincible, it's hard. This is why like the people of Metropolis are like, they love Superman, and then there's some people that hate Superman because it's like, yo, this guy, like he's invincible. He could do anything. He could take anything. I don't feel safe around him because he could hurt me and there's nothing I could do about it, right? Like he has no weaknesses. We all know that he does, but a man with no weaknesses is like, it could be scary to people. And as a father, we do want to continue to be the superhero. We do want to continue to shine as a superhero, but sometimes they got to know that we have a kryptonite. Sometimes we do have to let them know, because if they're trying to mirror us and they're trying to be like us and we're perfect and we're invincible, and then they're not, right? Because that's just the reality. They think we are, but they know they're not. They know they're making mistakes. They know they're not doing what they're supposed to do. They know they're coming up short. What starts to happen is their self-esteem starts to kind of fade, because I can never be what my dad was, especially for young boys. I have no ability to be, or young girls, I can never find a man that's the same as my dad. And so she goes through life struggling with men because she's constantly trying to find somebody who is you or better than you. And the reality is that you ain't that perfect. Or your son can't ascend to his optimal level because he's chasing some dream of you that doesn't exist. But when you're open and when you're vulnerable, you endear people to you. They attach to you. They get excited about being around you. They don't want to see you weak. And when I say vulnerable, I'm not saying weak. That's completely different. Like, I don't want to follow a weak leader, but a leader who demonstrates strength in his weakness, who overcomes, who shows courage, who's not showing me that he's not afraid, but is showing me that even in fear, he's going to move forward. That's the guy I want to get behind. Matter of fact, I want to move with him when he moves. Right? I want to go do what he does, because he's shown me that even when I'm scared, if I continue to move forward, I have an opportunity to be successful. And I don't know about you. You do what you want to do in your fatherhood, right? And hopefully, everything works out for you. And I won't know until my kids are adults if what I'm saying is going to work for me. So when I'm saying these things, you take it and you do what you want with it. But for me and mine, I'm open, honest, and vulnerable. Right? Because what happens is they then too are open, honest, and vulnerable with me. We have very open lines of communication. My daughters can share whatever's going on in their life because I can share whatever. And I'm not talking about problem dumping on children, right? And I can see it already in the comments. Kids don't need to know all this. And you're right. There are some things that kids don't need to know, but there are some things that they can learn from and grow through if they go through it with you. Not like they're going to help me process my problems. Absolutely not. But they are going to know that, hey, some things are going on. This is how I handle it. This is what's going on with me. This is how daddy feels, but this is what he's doing to overcome. And when something like this happens for you, you can do it too. You got to pick and choose your spots though, right? Like there's some things obviously you don't want your kids to know you're struggling with. And there's some things that they need to be aware of because they can participate or they can understand, or there's a lesson to be learned there. Right? There's these opportunities for you to father, and you have to take advantage of those opportunities when they present themselves. Right? And that is a part of being vulnerable. right? Next part of that, going back to Leonidas, right? We're talking about being the king of the household and king this, king that, right? The story and legend of Leonidas lives on. If you watch the movie, actually the movie is I forgot the dude's name, but he's actually telling the story of Leonidas to the next group of men that are going to fight in that particular war. So like the movie is not actually the movie. The movie is the story. The reason that story happens is because the legend of Leonidas lives on forever, right? So kings actually don't live physically forever, right? And that's obvious in the movie. He got hit with 30 arrows. So kings don't live forever, but they become immortal because of what they accomplished or what their kingdom accomplished during their rule. So Leonidas' name lives on and rings through eternity, not because of himself necessarily, but because of the things that he was able to do, because of who his people were, right? Like, I'm not going to live forever. I talked about health earlier, and I'm gonna do everything I can to be here for as long as I can because I love fatherhood that much that I want to be a father for as long as I can be. But I know I'm not going to be here forever. What is going to be here forever, though, is the stories that people tell about me, that my children specifically tell about me. When they tell their kids and their grandkids, their great grandkids, and all these people get to hear the story of, my grandpa or my great grandpa or my dad. What stories do you want them to hear? What's the light that you want to be painted in? What is it that you want them to be saying about you? What are those things, right? And that's what I think about is like, when my name echoes through eternity, are there going to be positive, like, is there going to be smiles coming behind that, or is it going to be like, oh man, he sucked, right? Am I going to be the mad king, or is it going to be like, oh man, King Rod the second, he was amazing, he was such a great man, right? Not only that, the stories that people tell about me, but then they'll look at my children and my children's children, but man, somebody raised you right. Like, somebody did a good job raising you. Somebody was a good father to you. Somebody really fathered you in the way that you need to be fathered. That's how we live forever. Is what we do in our time with our own lives, and then the impact that we leave on the lives of others. So the story of Leonidas lives on, not only because of the spear throwing, but the way that he was with his men. Like, if you watch the movie, there's a bond there that's stronger than I'm a soldier and you're a soldier. There's a level of care, of love, of trust, of honor, of dignity, like all of these things. You can see it. It's palpable. You can almost feel it. It's because he's vulnerable with them. They know his strengths. They know his weaknesses. They know that if he takes his shield down and he takes off his helmet, that he's just a man like them. They understand that. But that's also his strength, because he's courageous enough to bear himself, to go out in the world and face the God King and all of the minions around him without all of the protections. That's courage, right? That's not weakness. That's not fear. It's not vulnerability, right? It's courage. It's have the courage to be vulnerable, right? Live on through eternity. And then lastly, and this is something that we all have to deal with, because we are all working on being a better man, husband, father. And we know that anytime we get improvements, it's not always going to be uphill, right? Even in the case of Leonidas, right? We want to overcome and overthrow and protect our land from the quote unquote God King. Well, we're going to have to take a loss, and it's probably going to be the biggest loss that we've ever taken. Leonidas has to go, right? The up is, boom, he hits him in the face. We realize it's just a man. The down is, Leonidas is now gone. Okay. So in order for us to conquer, we have to take some losses. And so you have to understand that when you pray for rain, you also have to deal with the mud. So like when we're going out and fighting these battles, we know that there's going to be some losses to it, right? But with the victory that we get out of it, which is what we're seeking, there's some losses along the way. And we have to be okay with that. We have to understand that that is a part of the journey, right? It's not going to be all uphill, right? Roller coasters wouldn't be fun if they only went up. They got to come down. And that's the fun part, because we know we're going to go back up, right? That's the way things are, and that's the way it's going to be. Okay. There's an old Asian proverb that says, with no mud, there's no lotus, meaning without the rain, we don't get mud. Without the mud, we don't get the flowers, right? The beautiful parts that come from all of that. And so understand that while you're on this journey to be a better man, a better husband, a better father, that there are going to be some ups and downs, some things that you can't imagine are going to happen to you, that happen, and they're going to feel like this is not what I should be doing. It's going to feel like I should probably stop. I should feel like I should give up. But that is not the end for you. Okay, it's not a stop light. It's a stop sign. Okay, you just keep going forward. Keep going forward. And even at a stoplight, it just holds you for longer, but you continue forward, right? You don't end your journey at the stoplight. It's just a part of the journey, right? So as we continue to work through fatherhood, it's just a part of the journey. All right, fellas, that is going to do it for this episode of the podcast. Couple things before I get out. Again, Magic Mind, talked about it earlier. I'm just telling you my experience. Okay, I'm just telling you my experience. You do what you want to do with it, right? But if you decide you want to give it a shot, give it a try, it's 100% money back guarantee. You get your money back in a few hours after you get it. If you don't like it, www.forfeit fatherhood. Make sure you use code Forfeit Fatherhood 20 so that you can save an extra 20%. Or if you do the subscription, which I suggest, you'll save 56%, which is a really, really good deal. Other things. The Forfeit Fatherhood community, the 4-Pillar Fathers community, will be live. I've set a date for it. It will be live on May 17th. Some of you have already gotten emails or gotten messages on Instagram about joining early. And that's just to kind of help me fill it out and make sure that it is everything that it's supposed to be for you guys. I love the podcast. I love Instagram following. I love all the places that we get to interact, but they are very, very limited in terms of your ability to interact with me. It's a lot of me telling you stuff, one-sided. I think growth happens on a two-way street, right? I think when we can have conversation going back and forth where I'm talking about something and you're call and response kind of thing, I think we get a lot more. I get more out of it, and I know for sure you will. So stay tuned for that. Matter of fact, if you go to my Instagram page right now, Forfeit Fatherhood on Instagram, if you click the link in my bio, you can get early access and get in there for free. You can be one of those people that get grandfathered in, one of the alpha testers that can get in and kind of tell me a little bit about what you'd like to see in the community, and that kind of stuff. I think that's it for this episode, man. I really appreciate you guys taking the time as always, and I look forward to talking to you soon.